Hi there, I'm Kevin Benedict, Senior Analyst for Digital Transformation here at Cognizant. Hello, I'm Kevin Benedict, Senior Analyst for Digital Transformation here at Cognizant. And I want to thank Dipesh Mukerji,
Correct.
Who's the Senior Director of Product Strategy for Kony.
Correct.
I want to welcome you.
Thank you, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're
It's good to
live.
be here.
We're live here at the M Enterprise Conference in Boston this week. And Kony, you guys have been around. You've been a bright star out there. But platforms in general have almost kind of diminished in favor anyway within the industry. I remember back when I was really engaged as a CEO of a mobile app company, everything was about platforms.
Correct.
You have to have a platform because nobody knows how to do mobility without it. You need to have the offline databases as part of it, the synchronization, conflict resolution, the whole thing. That's how it started.
Correct. Yep.
And then it seemed like people started looking at all these different kinds of SDKs and mobile app development tools in different kinds, and then there was cloud, mobile backend as a service, and all these other kinds of things. So it seemed like people started saying, look, we should look at best of breed.
Absolutely.
Because I have all my developers, they all have their favorites over here that they want to build in. We can figure out maybe SAP can help us with APIs, so we can do some of that. But I've always been preaching that the total cost of ownership is impacted dramatically if you choose to walk away from a platform.
Right.
What do you think?
Well, it's a couple topics to cover there. So let's talk about how it all happened. In the beginning with platforms, essentially you had not the skill sets weren't there in terms of developers of iOS and Android were just starting to come up. We're talking 2007 with iOS. Android started soon thereafter, about a year or so after that. And there weren't developers out there to build for these tablets or phones and what have you in the operating system. So the lack of skill sets made platforms valuable. On top of that, by the number of devices and the number of operating systems being extreme, people having to build over and over the same app, roughly, if they wanted to, over and over, made the total cost of ownership be extremely high. You have to build and hire those people. You have to build. It takes time, 6-month cycles, 8-month cycles, and do it again and again and again.
Right.
Makes the cost very high. Platforms then became very, very valuable because they use one scripting language like JavaScript or what like we do and write to all those devices. Subsequently, mobile has exploded. What does that mean? Skill sets have grown up, so there are now plenty. You can find an iOS developer, an Android developer, a Windows developer. There are a dime a dozen. They're everywhere because it's lucrative. So obviously, the skill sets have grown, so people can build in-house much easier now. They have the skill sets. If they're building HTML5, someone who knows web already knows it. So in that middle cusp time, the platform kind of started to dwindle. Even more so now because BlackBerry, let's be frank, BlackBerry has diminished in market share quite considerably, so a lot of people don't look at that as a separate operating system to build for. Platforms are valuable when there's multiple devices on multiple operating systems. So I think that age is starting to turn again and it's starting to come back to platforms. The reason being is the Internet of Things is a great bastion for platforms to exploit. So if wearables, if anything, glasses, watches, what have, any sensory kind of technology, TVs, home, if they start to build on their own operating system, then platforms become valuable again. And the TCO will start to make sense again in terms of saying, hey, I don't have the skill set or someone to build in-house for my watch or glass or home application, whatever it might be.
So let's make that point to the audience here. When you're only building for iOS and you've got a lot of creative types and you're only doing a couple apps,
right?
Well, you can build an end-to-end solution. You can maintain it with the same team that did it, keep it on a reasonable upgrade cycle. But when you start getting to volume, you have 10 apps, you have 15 apps, you have 20 apps, you become mission critical. You have 10,000 customer apps out there or 10 million customer apps out there. Suddenly there's this TCO that's really getting hard because you find yourself with dozens and dozens and dozens of developers just trying to maintain existing apps.
Correct. And so,
and if the code bases are made by all kinds of different people in creative, unique ways, the backend APIs have been done custom from a bunch of different contractors that have long since left.
Correct.
You have a complete mess.
Absolutely. So as you get more systems and the chaos that you're talking about of customized APIs that are all over the place, legacy APIs to new age APIs. It doesn't even have to be APIs. We're talking about ODBC database connections that have to be part of it as well. Those are not APIs necessarily. I mean, there's a complete chaos and mess there. Let's go back to TCO with this. In terms of TCO, if you're building, as you mentioned, people take that iOS app, they build 10,000 apps. Well, that's how TCO with platforms and those types of things come into play and start to make sense. If you have all this chaos and you're only building one app, whether you're using a platform or whether you're building individually with a certain set of developers, makes no difference. Your cost efficiency is the same. You're gaining no traction. But when you know you have a strategy, or you know you're going to build 10, 20 apps, and you're going to leverage all of those back-end systems that you might have, SAP, SharePoint, what have you, with all that chaos, platforms and TCO start to make more sense, because you can potentially get anywhere from 4x to 8x gain with the platform. Reason being is that when you're building these apps connecting to those chaos, all those APIs and those types of things, they become reusable on platforms. So whether it's a module in terms of a UI front end that leverages a back end integration to SAP or whatever it might be, you can take that because it's written in one scripting language, and you can leverage it on the next app that you build and say, I don't have to build this section again, it's already there, we built it on app 1, I'm on app 100. Maybe say I have a checklist of 10 things I want to put in. 8 of them I've already built on some app on the platform using that same scripting language, and I can just use them again. So technically I only have 2 things left to build out of those 10.
Yes.
My time to market is 10 times faster, and I'm not having to leverage the skill sets, and my time to deployment is that much faster, hence an 8x potential savings.
And Dipesh, you know as well as I do that somebody's going to have to maintain an app when the developer's gone.
Exactly.
And the maintenance of it and the help desk needs to have some kind of a standardized understanding of how things are developed, integrated, supported, secured, tested, etc. Platforms give you a standardized process to be able to do that, don't they?
Exactly right. So the standardization is the key word there. So when you're using platforms, everything either integrates or works off of each other. So an IT administrator who has to, if your IT administrator deploys or manages these applications, having that person involved from the very beginning in terms of knowing how the apps are going to be created, built, from design to development, and then leveraging that same platform technology that you use for designing and development as a method of then being congruent with your management tool set, makes for the IT administrator very, very easy and seamless, because they know what was involved since the beginning of the app, and they have the same tool set that they're using through the platform to manage the app. So it's not learning a new tool to manage something that was built on a different technology. It's the same tool set all the way across, so you can follow it through, which makes, again, time to market faster and cost more efficient.
Absolutely. So, and securing an application. If you have dozens of applications built in different ways, the possible gaps in security and loopholes and holes and corners where people can insert bad stuff or take control is extraordinarily broad, the range. If you start standardizing in your security as well and your approach to development, and you know that these 8 modules are already secure, then you're limiting the variables that can go wrong with future apps.
That's a fantastic point. So as you just mentioned, if you're using the same modules, the same technology development, and you know it's secure, and to be frank with you, I shudder to use the phrase, you know it's secure, because the second you think it's secure, it's not secure. I was, just to kind of go off a little bit here, I was at the Gartner conference last week, and Peter Thiel, the very famous investor, was there, and they asked him, what do you think are the major areas of basically ROI in the next 10 years or so? And he said security, though not sexy, mobile security is probably the biggest bastion of revenue and wealth for anyone, because this will be attacked, as you can see, with celebrities and everything else, constantly over the next phase. So making apps secure is paramount, and it's never going to stop. The second you think it's secure, it's going to change. So in terms of that idea, I would say having that ability to use the same module over and over and knowing that's secure, it's great and helps you manage, but you can't live on your laurels, because it will change soon thereafter, and you'll find that you have to fix something in that module, and then you have to fix it in all 8 necessarily if they find a breach for some reason.
So Dipesh, one of the other trends that I've noticed is that probably if we go back 4 years ago, everybody's jumping on the bandwagon for enterprise mobility. Everyone's wanting to pump out apps. They're jumping into proof of concepts. And what happened is that so many of the proof of concepts were so challenging, and when they calculated the cost of what it took to do those proof of concepts, and then extrapolated that cost into 100 additional apps, they stopped and said, time out, man, that's taken, that, if the first app is representative of the cost of all apps, this is going to be astronomical, and there's no way we can do this. So I saw almost a pause in the marketplace, seriously, where all vendors said, this just doesn't work.
No, you've hit on something that's very interesting there. It's absolutely true. So POCs these days have become extremely complex. Just to give you an example, I remember Shell Oil Gas came and they basically gave us a POC because it's Shell Oil and they're, I mean, one of the top 4 most revenue generating companies. They can make any vendor do anything for them because they want that deal. Exactly. Which means their POC requirements can be up the wazoo and everyone will do it. There has to be a balance between a vendor being able to say, you know what, you're basically asking me to build an entire application, and given what you're asking in the requirements, I am not potentially willing, or you have to have a simpler POC because you're basically getting something for free when other customers of ours are paying us hand over fist for almost something similar in scope. So is it fair to do it this way? This is a little bit of a business model. The truth of the matter is be very frank, there's no real way around it. If you want the account, if you're not an IBM, if you're not a large scale company that can just say no to that account because you're generating revenue everywhere else. If you're some mid-sized player, if you're our size or anybody else's, you have to fight for that deal because the account and the value of that revenue is worth more. So can you be exploited through some of these scopes of these POCs? If you're a small company, the truth is, yeah, you have to. I mean,
you could go bankrupt doing POCs.
Absolutely, you can. But what's the fact is, what's the risk? If you don't do that POC and you're small and you're trying to get the Shell account, which could make your year or 3 years or 5 years, the risk of not doing it and being out of the POC because these guys have other vendors who will service them and say, fine, if you don't want us, we'll go there. You can't take that risk. So it's a David and Goliath issue in that sense. And in this case, David usually loses.
So when you look at the complexity and the expense of that first POC, but that doesn't necessarily represent, as we pointed out, the equivalent cost in all future apps.
Correct.
Because if they choose to standardize and build on any particular app so they can build experience and skill sets internally and processes and governances around help desk and policy and all that within a platform, that will dramatically reduce future development.
It's very clear that you're hitting on this point of standardization, and that's exactly right. If you're able to replication, right? If you do the same thing over and over, whether it's the UI, UX front end, whether it's the back end, whether it's security, if you're able to create a replicable model that's standardized in approach, everybody gets used, every key stakeholder involved in the process gets used to it. They understand it, they leverage it, they know its loopholes, they know its problems, they know that its benefits. You can keep using it over and over. The only, and by using it over and over, obviously the TCO goes down. The truth is, that does sometimes change. You can't always use over and over. As these operating systems become new, as new security breaches are found, or what you thought was secure one day isn't secure the next day, you do have to adjust, and that adjustment does mean that if you did it 8 times in 8 different apps, that adjustment has to now happen on all those 8 apps again, which is where, again, a platform makes sense, because if you do it, make that change once, you can do it for all 8 of those apps, or 100 or whatever it may be. So the truth is, standardization is good. Standardization and replicable model certainly helps TCO get low. But at some point in time, something happens that makes that change. So you have to take the good with the bad.
So it's not always standardization of the code base, but it's standardization of the process. Of the process.
Correct. Of the process itself. So doing these, as we mentioned, a lot of people come and they want to build an app for the first time and they just want to get something out the door. Instead of knowing that they're going to have to build 5, 6 apps and having a replicable process that's efficient, getting key stakeholders involved from day one, building the design in this kind of whatever fashion you determine, and then once you do it, you know it works, do it the same way over and over again, and that process makes sense in terms of TCO as well.
So walk us through, Dipesh, walk us through what would happen with 50 apps within an enterprise. They're all on iOS 6.
Yeah.
And suddenly there's new versions of iOS out there, and overnight end users are starting to want to connect with a new version. If you had created all of them
in iOS,
just being native and having people do it their own way and creative using different creative variances and things.
Right.
How does that scenario look different from one that would be standardized on a platform?
Oh, it's very different. So in the scenario of, let's say you're on iOS, let's take the recent one, iOS 7 to iOS 8. Let's say you built 50 apps on iOS 7. Truth of the matter is, you get the key stakeholders back in the room to discuss how you want to, what's the benefits of iOS 8? Do I want to put an iBeacons, let's say, or something like that? Do you do it on all 50 apps? No, absolutely not. No one, any large-scale organization would say no to that. You basically figure out what app is probably going to be the least intrusive initially, but have some usage to test if these are working. And what you do is you get, as I mentioned, the key stakeholders, IT, business, marketing, sales, whoever is involved with that specific app that you want to try it on, and you figure out what are the features or the features you want to take out for iOS 8. You then determine what the implications of that are to your infrastructure, to your development time, to your design, whatever it might be, and you build it out and you test it. If it works, the beauty of it is if you're using a platform for this change for that app, if it works, you can then exactly take whatever it might be of that process, whether it's the development of what you built, whether it's the management of it, security of it, and take that, because it's on the same platform that everything else was built on, you can easily place it in the other 49 apps. So that's the beauty of the platform in that sort of way, and that's the beauty of the standardization process, because the 49 other apps were built on the same platform. So if you made that change to that one app on the first app, you know you can take that and put it on the other ones because you know the process. The process shouldn't be any different on the other apps. Obviously there's nuances. Nothing is completely 100% that way, but in general, it would be beneficial in terms of time and those types of things.
Got it. Hey, I want to just thank Dipesh for joining us today. Sure. And I want to make a call out to my buddy Sam Lakundi.
Absolutely.
Sorry you're not here in Boston. Sorry you're not here in Boston at the AM Enterprise Conference. But Dipesh, thank you so much for sharing your insight and experiences.
It was a pleasure. Always a pleasure, Kevin. Thank you so much.
And thank you for watching.